Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is July 8th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? This is going to be a very quick update, nothing too long. I just wanted to first discuss on the map the Orikhiv axis, which is west of Zaporizhia, closer to the Dnipro River. As indicated on this map that I made, the Ukrainians are just a few hundred meters away from the village of Robotine. So this is a difficult nut to crack. I've already said that multiple times, but the Russians, as you can see on this map, have many defensive positions, trenches, and so the Ukrainians are advancing slowly here, mainly due to the trenches and also the minefields that the Russians have. The Russians also have the Lancet drones that are also attacking Ukrainian convoys and small formations. They're going on the offensive, so it makes the job very difficult for the Ukrainians. But the good news, as I've mentioned in the previous video I made, is that the Ukrainians are getting cluster munitions and they have been approved by the United States. Now, there's a lot of people, a lot of countries, I should say, that are opposing this. And I would say that these governments are mostly useful idiots for Putin, now saying that it's against human rights to use them, whereas Russia's been using them as of day one against civilian targets and infrastructure. And now the world is somewhat concerned that Ukraine is getting them. And Ukraine is getting them because they're not planning to attack Russia in Russia with these cluster munitions. They're planning to use them against the fascist Russian soldiers and clearing up these trenches, these minefields. And I forgot to mention that again in my previous video. Some of you guys commented that yes, indeed, these cluster munitions are also going to be great at clearing these massive saturated fields full of Russian mines, right? That's what makes the job very difficult right now for Ukraine to advance super quickly. Another thing why they're advancing slowly, the Ukrainian forces, that the Russians are constantly pushing reserves to patch the holes that they have in the defenses, right? And the Russians, as I'll show you in the last slide, are okay with that. They're okay with dying and they're just going to continue whining. And that's about the extent of it. So the Russians still have a massive army. They still have a lot of manpower and the Russians are okay with dying, right? So that's the reason why the Ukrainians are advancing slowly. And the last reason, actually, I forgot to mention, is because Ukraine hasn't committed the entirety of its forces. They're not revealing everything. And as some reports have indicated, Ukraine hasn't committed 100% of its brigades on the entire front line, which makes the Russians also very anxious because they know that the full might of the Ukrainian offensive hasn't yet come. And the last thing I should also mention is that I've already seen videos of the Ukrainians operating the Swedish CV90s. They're supposed to get about 1,000 of them now. 1,000 is going to be in the long term, many years down the line. But Ukraine, I think, is getting about 50 to 100 of them in the near future. Now, I've already seen videos of them somewhere in Ukraine. So Ukraine is going to be using these CV90s, which are going to be very helpful at slicing through Russian tanks, Russian APCs, and other positions because they have some great cannons and very great firepower. And also the protection level is very good on these CV90s. So I'm excited to see them in action. And again, I want to mention that they're not this panacea, right? The CV90s or the Abrams, they're not going to be, somewhat the massive game changer. I think it's the combined arms operation that is a game changer for Ukraine. And Ukraine still doesn't have the F-16s or air superiority over the Russians, which again is another reason why it makes the job difficult for them to attack these very well entrenched Russian positions in Zaporizhia and Donbass, and also Kherson. I'll keep you guys updated as to how things develop. But so far, I'm very impressed and I'm very optimistic in terms of the Ukrainian gains. So they're just a few hundred meters away from Robotine. So the near future, we should be getting some good news out of Orikhiv as well. Now, this is a really great article that was written by the Daily Beast. And it's just kind of a reminder of how the West, especially European nations and the United States, got Putin so wrong. And so I really like this paragraph that I've copied here on this presentation about George Bush and how he perceived Putin as a very straightforward and trustworthy person. So let me read it for you. At first, the mistakes we made about Putin could be written off to inexperience. In 2001, just a year after Putin had assumed power, George W. Bush famously said he was able to look Putin in the eye and get a sense of his soul. Now, remember in 2001, of course, it was 9/11. And I remember, if I remember correctly, Putin had called George Bush and offered his unconditional support to the United States, right? Kind of cementing this relationship with the United States, showing that they have no boundaries and they're going to be, actually friends rather than foes, right? And unfortunately, I think it was a ruse from Putin to try to start creating this illusion that Russia is a peaceful, democratic country that believes in, global stability. As a result of this spiritual journey, the American president concluded that the Russian leader was a very straightforward and trustworthy. Like Bush, successive American presidents were played by Putin, cowed by his use of force, seduced into thinking the power of their personalities or diplomacy could contain the threat he posed. As a result, Putin was able to repeatedly catch America flat-footed in Georgia, in Ukraine, and in Syria. Our responses in each of these cases were too weak, and then, under President Donald Trump, the United States had a president who went a step further and was seduced by Putin's seeming strength. Now, say what you want about Biden. I know maybe some of you guys don't like him as a president. You might have your reservations against him. That's fair. I understand that. But he's the only president ever since Putin got in power in Russia that showed teeth to Putin. That is undeniable. And I remember my feelings back in 2014 when Russia invaded Ukraine, annexed Crimea, started the war in Donbass. What did the Obama administration do? Very little, right? And they forced Ukraine to sign the Minsk deals, which were unfavorable to Ukraine, and then eventually laid down the path to this massive war in Ukraine and all the tragedies that are currently happening in Ukraine is the reason. The reason why this is happening in Ukraine is because of Obama, the administration, the David Cameron administration, Merkel, François Hollande, and the other European nations that did not show teeth to Putin at that time and gave him more confidence to continue down the path of just becoming a brutal dictator. And so again, say what you want about him, but he is the only president that offered massive military and financial support to Ukraine. He read Putin correctly, and he understood that the only way to end Putin's evil and his evil regime is that you need to show teeth and you need to do a show of force. And that's what he did. Putin was allowed far too long to be decadent, to establish his system, his regime with European nations, right? The elites buying their beautiful, lavish condos and villas and mansions in either London or in Italy, in France, spending all their wealth in Europe and establishing these corrupt systems in Europe. And Europe allowed Putin to create that system and that support network, so his elite can live off very well and continue supporting Putin. So the West has a lot of blame, is to be blamed here as well for the fact that Putin got so strong so quickly. But now look, with Biden's support, the United States, Britain, great Ukraine ally, Poland, the Baltics, even France now, Italy, like countries, Germany, countries that you would never have thought a year ago, would be supporting Ukraine the way they are right now. It's all thanks to the Ukraine resolve, but also to the leadership of Biden, I think. 500 days in, guys. Today is officially 500 days that we're in this war. And not only Ukraine was able to defend itself throughout these 500 days, but was able to conduct several successful counteroffensives against Russia and is now in a winning position. We're not talking about, is Ukraine going to fall now? We're talking about, when is Russia going to fall? Because it's just a matter of time. And as this article mentioned so correctly, the Tsar has no clothes. During this 500 days, we saw mutiny that showed Putin's weakness and his regime just literally being a house of cards. And if he's toppled, things are going to start crumbling very, very quickly. So Putin might have his beautiful golden robe, Tsar robe with his crown, but underneath, he's just naked. And last video is to show you guys that it's another reason why Russia will never win this war. It's a country of whiners. and they whine, they complain, but they somehow think that by doing that, that's going to help them bring closer to victory. And so, referring back to the map, as I've said, Russia's pushing a lot of its reserves to plug the holes. And this is one of those units that was sent to the front line thinking that they were supposed to be on the third line of defense. But then reality came forward, and they actually were the very first line of defense, fighting against Ukrainian tanks with only AK-47s or AK-74s and a few grenades. So let's hear what they have to say. So this is them complaining yet again. Representatives of the Altai Krai 394 Regiment 11th Company. Primorsky Krai 394 Regiment 11th Company, Sakha Republic, Yakutia. And so it starts. We appeal to you regarding the most acute of issues. For 23 days, we've been on the Novodarivka direction. The active combat hostilities began on July 4th. We were near the village of Novodarivka. No artillery support, nothing. No provision, no water, nothing. No supply. We're promised rotation. We've been here for 10 months with no ammunition since January. No salary. No payments were made. So let me rewind this back. Since January, only promises, no payments were made. So these guys since January were not paid by the Russian MOD. I don't know about you guys, but if at my job I wasn't paid since January, I would definitely leave my job. And if I was forced to continue working, you would bet that me, as a person that appreciates freedom, appreciates justice, I would find a way to get out of that situation, right? Or at least I would do something about it, because that's literally modern day slavery. They're forcing these guys to fight without a wage. So these guys are pretty much slaves. It's no different than it was, 2,000 years ago under the Roman Republic. And so they can't even realize that they're actual slaves. They're fighting a war. They're literally putting their lives down the line. For what? To just die, not even being able to be receiving a salary, a wage? I think it's crazy. They want to forcefully deploy us again in Novodarivka, so we will refuse. How many people did you have in total? In the company, we had 106 people, only 40 remain. So that's 66 people that are dead. We have both killed and wounded since January of this year. We haven't been paid. There were also promises as participants and veterans of the SMO. They were just promises. We didn't even see the papers. So probably some bonuses that they were supposed to receive. Incentives. And now they want us there again with no artillery, no heavy vehicle support, only rifles against tanks. We also have to fight for our own money. All we've got left is to buy our own ammo. Guys, do you ever remember a war where soldiers were forced to buy their own ammunition? I mean, that's just ridiculous. How does that even happen? They haven't been paid since January, and now they have to buy their own ammunition? And you expect Russia to win this war? These little feeble men, these slaves, are supposed to even buy their own ammunition while they're not even getting paid? That's crazy. All the items that were given to us by the army were destroyed by bombs. We have 2 shovels left for the whole company. That's nothing. They only have shovels to fight with. Our medics have no drugs, no bandages. Evacuation takes a very long time. Guys had to stay in bushes for more than... Sorry, I missed that part. Had to stay in bushes for more than a day. And lastly, what did they say? We even blew up our own mines. Blew up on our own mines. So, guys, Russia's done for. This proves... Now, this is very anecdotal. Maybe it's not a real video. I don't know. But it seems to be very real. Anyways, I think we've seen enough of these videos to understand that the operational war that Russia's conducting is coming to a very near end. They're incapable, at the very least, to do offensives now, or combined arms offensives. There's no denying. They can't get their medics on the front line in time. They can't bring the logistics, the important supplies to the men on the front line, fuel, just crucial stuff that these men need. Even getting paid, they can't even. I'm guessing they don't even want to pay them. That's not a matter of if they can, they don't want to pay these men, right? They just want them to die as quickly as possible. That's how Russia treats its own people. There's no hope for these people. There's no hope for Russia. And it's a country of whiny complainers. And so that's why they're going to lose. And when they're going to lose, everything is going to crumble and collapse. And Russia is not going to exist in the same form it exists today. It's not going to be the biggest, greatest country as many Russians believe it to be. So that's the video for today, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below about this video. How do you expect Russia to lose very soon, or do you think it's still going to be a very long time before we start seeing signs of these cracks in the Russian foundation? And again, thank you for your support for this channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you. Take care.